So you subsequently went on to have a fantastic solo career, but I'd love to know how your most recent recording, I'm in Love, ranks on your list of personal favorites. I mean, reading the story behind the song's provenance almost feels kind of like an archaeological dig. How did you first discover the song and its story?
Well, so there was quite a few songs that Lennon and McCartney wrote at that in that early period when they'd just been taken on by Brian Epstein and they finally get signed to a Parlophone in the UK. And they were still doing cover songs and they're writing a lot of their own material, which actually quite unusual at that time. Buddy Holly and the Crickets were one of the few groups that were doing that. Usually, you get songs from professional songwriters, but
Mm-hmm.
they were writing their own tunes. And then Brian Epstein had a stable of other acts that he was managing, people like the Fourmost, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, Cilla Black. I mean, some really great artists. And so when they had a tune that they weren't going to do with the Beatles or didn't maybe think it was quite up to what they would like to do, they would hand it off to these other artists. And so the song "I'm in Love," which is credited to Lennon and McCartney, was done by a band called the Fourmost. And I was aware of the song. It wasn't a particular favorite, but what moved the needle for me was that at some point, I was later told it had been leaked as a bootleg in the 2000s, but it might have been officially debuted when they were doing something called the Lost Lennon tapes. And there was an ongoing syndicated radio broadcast that would play these rare demos of John's and unreleased whatevers. And so I think that song got originally played and then bootlegged. And it was just John at a piano singing and playing, the song "I'm in Love" when it was 1963. And when I heard that demo, I thought, my gosh, how far off the mark the released version was by the Foremost, which George Martin produced. But it was just kind of polite, but John's vocal was very soulful and guttural, and it reminded me of like "All I've Got to Do" or "Not a Second Time," even "I Want to Hold Your Hand," all written in that same period. It just kind of had that feel about it. I said, "Oh my gosh." One day I'm going to record that song. I would love to do a version of that I thought maybe went closer to what could have happened had the Beatles done it. Now, there's been a lot of people that have covered "I'm in Love," but they've all kind of mirrored the arrangement that the Foremost did. So, I mean, for me to go back, like I love the way you call it, like an archaeological dig. And some of the people that have heard it that know the song as well as I do have remarked that it felt like that to them too. Like, wow, it's finally getting a presentation that's maybe fitting of the song. Now I'm calling it a Lennon song because it just sounds like maybe it was just John on his own. Because there was a lot of demos that have surfaced from that time, like "Bad to Me," and other songs where it's John and Paul in the room singing and playing because they've worked on it. But this was John on his own, just kind of just doing a run through of it. And so then fast forward to April of this year, and this friend of mine, Craig Hopkins, he's a local guy I see a lot of concerts. He's a big Beatles collector. I would say high-end Beatles collector. He's got an incredible like museum quality collection of Beatles stuff. And we saw each other at a Ringo show. He says, "Look, I'm going back to the UK for a kind of a Beatles trip in next year." This was in 2023. "Do you want to go?" I was like, "Man, this would be great." Because I'd never done like a proper let's go Beatles sightseeing. I've been to London a bunch, had been by Abbey Road, I'd done certain things, but he was going to go there for 3 days and then to Liverpool. And I'd never ever been to Liverpool, crazily enough, in all my travels. So great. And oh yeah, we're gonna, I'm gonna I think we'll be able to book a day at Abbey Road. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is talk about bucket list or dream, come true. So turns out we were able to secure a date at Abbey Road, and he plays a bit of guitar and piano and wanted to record some things for himself. But he said you could just have the rest of the day. And a third buddy of ours, Dennis Poggenberg, joined us also, and he plays some great guitar. So I had to choose. Okay, how am I going to use my time at Abbey Road once I get over the awe of being in Studio Two, this iconic room where so much of that music, was recorded. It's probably 80% of the Beatles' music was recorded in that room. And it looks the same as it did. They haven't really changed much over the years, except in the control room, which has got much more modern recording capabilities, though they still have a lot of the old outboard gear. Um, so I did a solo piece that was called "Truth," and that was just electric guitar, my kind of delayed, wet guitar sound, in that room. That turned out nice. But for the version of I'm in Love, I had them provide they had an old Ludwig drum set and a bass rig. Daniel Steinhardt, my friend from the Pedal Show, brought his 61 Vox AC30. And as you can see in the video, I'm playing my 65 Strat. And along with that, when the engineer was conversing with me via email before the session, he said, well, what sounds are you going for? I said, well, think Beatles 64, around that era. And they still have all the original microphones,
Oh, wow.
kept in pristine condition. So he had all the original microphones that they would have sung in, played in, used. Even the two Fairchild 660 limiters were in the control room for the drum overhead and for the bass, just like they would have used. So to say it was just the most Beatley experience I could have had, it was just incredible. And
Well,
so yeah,
I saw the video, and as soon as I
yeah,
saw it, my son who had the the mop top from until he was like
oh,
13,
nice,
he had the
yeah,
bowl cut till he was like 13.
okay,
He and I was like, you got to see this. Like, and he's
oh,
like, and he knew because I mean, we talked about him before the show.
yeah.
He knew about the other recording of it.
Oh, he
And
did. Wow,
and then when he saw this, he was like, yeah, this is much more
wow,
representative. And then
wow,
and
that's
then came
cool.
and then came the we were talking a little bit about it, and that brought about a selfish question that I wanted to ask, which
Yeah,
is, was it because there was nothing available? I mean, if you're going to do it, why not a Hofner, Rickenbacker, or
fair
Epiphone? Or is
enough.
it because of the sponsorship things you have, or because
Oh
they just
no,
didn't have them? There's selfishly, there's a part of me, it's like, opportunity. I wish there was a, you know what I mean?
no, I thought about it. So let me explain why I chose what I did. The bass I ended up doing with my Fender Fender P bass because it's my best sounding bass. Um, the guitar sound I was going for, now the Rickenbacker would have been obvious. I have a 66 Rickenbacker 12 string. This it has nothing to do with the endorsement. Of course, I'm playing a vintage Strat, and I have an
Yeah.
Ibanez signature guitar, so clearly that wasn't the issue. I was going for the Nowhere Man guitar sound, which is John and George playing their matching Sonic Blue Strats, early 60 Strats, into the same Vox AC30, then with the treble cranked up and then cranked up even more. So that when you hear the solo, that real chimey thing, that's kind of what I've got in mind. And that's why I wanted the hook of the song to be that kind of chimey guitar tone. Then you see me in the studio. That's my 63 J160E. That part had to be recorded back in Dallas because I didn't have my J160 there. They had a couple of acoustics at the studio, but they weren't quite the sound that I wanted. And then the Ludwigs, I have an older set of Ludwigs than what they had in the studio, and I had already done the entire demo here at my studio. And then what I did was take the multi-track over there and then replace each part as I had the time to do so in the studio. So that's how it was all kind of thrown together. But yeah, there could have been some more obvious pastiche, but there's been so much done in those ways that I thought I'm just going to avoid certain things and do it. And then when the little heavier guitar comes in, that takes it to a little later era as well. But I had to get a little bit of that in there, and I think it's pretty effective the way we did it. But I totally hear you, and trust me, all those thoughts were in my mind, and I just had
It
to go
was
down.
selfishly. It was selfishly
No, no,
on
not
my.
at all. I totally get it, but I had to go down my path, and that's just the way it worked.
What having been there, having been in the studio, having been through being in the business, what do you think truly gave the Beatles their magic? Was it just the right mix of talented guys at the right time and the right producer in George Morton, or
Mm.
was it much more than that?
I think there's just so many magical things on so many levels, and there's just example after example, and throughout their entire career, up until now and then, the most recent single. There's so many things that line up in such a miraculous way that it's like, how did this even happen? Had John not met Paul, had they not gotten Brian Epstein, had George Martin not seen the potential, all of these things, and Abbey Road is very much a part of it. Listen to how different the band sounds at the BBC as opposed to Abbey Road. Great band, great songs, but that studio is another member of the band. There's no doubt about it.
Even when you
George,
look at Get Back and how they tried to do it in one place and then they found
yeah,
themselves back at
yeah.
the studio and eventually on top of the studio, but still.
That's that. Thank God for Peter Jackson doing what he did, yeah, to jump around because when it came down to it, when they got on that roof and they start playing, and then half the record, it seems like so many of those versions from the rooftop is what's the recorded version. Something clicked with those guys. They was like, yeah, this is it. You can see John and Paul looking at each other with this look that's just like, yeah, man, we still got it. They had a really good day. You know what I mean? But you can only, and nobody will ever know, but the pressure that they were under, and just the personal lives were getting complicated. And so, but what Peter Jackson afforded us was the relief of going, you know what? Yeah, it was a really tough time for them, but the narrative that was presented in the original edit of the Let It Be film was completely shot to pieces with what he was able to dig out, and all the glorious fun moments and loving moments and heartbreaking moments. There was so much beauty that happened in that same 30 days that we never got to see until Peter Jackson. So that was a godsend for, I think, for Paul and Ringo too. They said, yeah, we believe what everybody else believed. That we were having a horrible time. We hated each other. But then you see the film and you go, no, they're still a great band. They're just having a really deeply stressful time. And how could they not with that kind of pressure? Brian Epstein had died a couple of years earlier, and they were spinning, man. And Paul, it's clear that Paul kept it together the best he could. He did the best he could, you know.
And the film I think takes a little heat off of Yoko there, and because
huge.
you realize that George was
Yeah.
at the point where he had his fill, right? So
Well, there's so many factors, but yeah, George had, I mean, got you should try to, compete with John and Paul, and Paul being very much a directing force, it was hard not to take it personally and not to have it be stifling in some ways. So you could see where they all just kind of needed a break.
so to kind of wrap up a little,
Yeah.
what else can our audience be on the lookout for
Hmm.
from you? What's next on
Sure.
tap, Andy?
So I'm just about finished with my follow-up. My last record was Electric Truth that Josh Smith, a great guitar player, produced for me. And this one we're co-producing. It's going to come out in January. There'll be a single later this month, and late August, early September, the first single from that record called Love is Greater Than Hate. And oh yeah, there'll be another solo record of solo pieces like the Truth track that I recorded at Abbey Road. And I've been getting lots of requests. I should do a whole record of because if the people don't know, I played all the instruments on that Lennon song. So people would like me to do a whole record of that kind of stuff. And I write a lot of kind of Beatley pop tunes myself. So maybe that'll happen this next year too.
Good deal. Where can our audience follow you on various social media platforms?
Well, the easiest thing is andytimmons.com, and then of course on all the Facebook and social Instagram, Twitter. It's usually just called Andy Timmons Official. It's pretty easy to find the real one, hopefully. But that's the best way to keep, tabs on new single releases. That's where most people saw my I'm in Love single. That or YouTube. So come find me, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And please stay in touch. And David, I really appreciate you. You clearly have done your homework, and I've had a great time with you, man. I hope you've had a good time.
Well, Andy, I thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man. Likewise.
Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Timmons.
Thank you.